Shakuntala, the Forgotten Bride. In a tranquil forest, nestled along the banks of the serene Malini River, lived a wise and revered sage named Shakuntala. His ashram, a haven of peace and learning, thrived amidst nature's embrace. One scorching summer day, Shakuntala made his way to the river for a refreshing dip. The crystal-clear waters of the Malini sparkled under the sun, inviting him with their cool allure. As he prepared to enter the river, an unusual sight arrested his attention. Lying helpless on the riverbank was a tiny baby girl. Surrounding her was a flock of vultures, their wings spread wide as if shielding her from the sun's harsh rays. Some of the birds gently fanned her with their wings, creating a scene both startling and tender. Shakuntala approached the child with care. Her radiant beauty captivated him. Her face and body seemed to emit a soft, glowing light. Moved by compassion, the sage picked up the baby and carried her back to the ashram. Upon arrival, he entrusted the infant to his sister, Gautami. "I found this little one abandoned in the forest," he said gently. "The Shakunt birds were protecting her. Let us name her Shakuntala in their honor." The ashram residents gathered around to catch a glimpse of the remarkable child. Their curiosity piqued. However, Gautami turned to her brother with a question. "You are a great sage, gifted with divine insight. Surely you can uncover the truth about this child. Who are her parents, and why was she left alone in the forest?" Shakuntala nodded, acknowledging her words. Like all great sages, he possessed the ability to discern the past and the future through deep meditation. Closing his eyes, he sank into quiet contemplation. Moments later, the answers unfolded within him, revealing the extraordinary story of the little girl and her origins. "It's a fascinating tale," Shakuntala began, his voice thoughtful. "It all started long ago with a mighty king named Vishvamitra. Renowned as a great warrior, his enemies trembled at the mere mention of his name. One day, while hunting in the dense jungle, King Vishvamitra lost his way. After hours of wandering, he stumbled upon the ashram of the venerable sage Vasishta. The sage welcomed the weary king with warmth, offering him shelter for the night. During his stay, Vasishta introduced the king to his prized possession, a divine cow named Nandini. This immortal cow, a gift from the Devtas, was the source of the sage's pride and reverence. Vishvamitra, who had heard tales of Nandini's miraculous powers, was captivated. He requested the sage to gift him the cow. However, Vasishta refused. The cow was sacred to him, a symbol of his devotion to the gods. Offended by the refusal, the proud king resolved to take Nandini by force. He attacked the ashram, intending to seize the cow, but the sage's spiritual power rendered him powerless. Without lifting a finger, Vasishta annihilated the king's entire army. Humbled and awestruck by the sage's immense power, Vishvamitra was consumed by a burning desire to surpass it. He renounced his throne and kingdom, retreating to the forest to dedicate himself to intense meditation, determined to gain greater spiritual strength than Vasishta. Lord Brahma, impressed by the king's unwavering devotion, granted him a boon, declaring him the greatest of all sages. Yet Vishvamitra's thirst for spiritual power was insatiable, and he continued his meditation. This relentless pursuit alarmed the Devtas. They worried about the balance of power and wondered, what more does he seek? Concerned, they turned to Indra, the king of heaven, for guidance. Indra devised a plan to distract the sage. He summoned Menaka, the most enchanting dancer of his celestial court, and sent her to earth. Her task was to disrupt Vishvamitra's meditation. Menaka descended to earth, singing and dancing by the serene tank where the sage meditated. The delicate sound of her anklets broke his trance. When Vishvamitra opened his eyes, he was spellbound by her beauty. Overcome with desire, he abandoned his meditation and married Menaka. For several years, they lived in happiness. In time, a daughter was born to them, a child of extraordinary beauty. But Menaka knew her earthly task was complete. She was bound to return to her heavenly abode. Meanwhile, Vishvamitra grew restless. The call of his spiritual quest grew louder each day, urging him to resume his interrupted meditation. One day, unable to resist any longer, he left Menaka and their life behind, retreating once more into the forest. Menaka, unable to take their child to heaven, placed the baby by the side of the Malini River and returned to her celestial realm. And that, concluded Kanva, is the story of little Shakuntala's origin. Now you understand how this divine child came to be with us. Under Rishi Kanva's care, Vishvamitra's daughter, Shakuntala, grew into a radiant young girl. Her beauty blossomed like the moon waxing each night, and her cheerful presence brought joy to everyone in the ashram. The sound of her laughter and chatter filled the air, and all the ashramites adored her. One day, while wandering in the forest, Shakuntala found a tiny fawn, helpless and alone. She brought it back to the ashram and cared for it tenderly. From that moment on, the little deer became her constant companion, following her everywhere like a shadow. Her closest friends, Ansuya and Priyangvada, shared her days, playing, working, and studying together. Shakuntala also assisted Gautami with her daily chores, and her special responsibility was to water the plants in the ashram garden, a task she performed with devotion, as every ashramite had a duty to fulfill. Years passed, and one day, Rishi Kanva decided to embark on a pilgrimage. Gathering Shakuntala and her friends, he informed them of his departure. "I will be away for some time," he said. "Shakuntala, you are in charge of the ashram. It will be your duty to take care of the guests who come here during my absence." Shakuntala, though young, accepted the responsibility with sincerity. A few days after Kanva's departure, Shakuntala and her friends were busy tending the plants and gathering fruits in the forest, as was their daily routine. The forest was alive with the calls of birds and the soft rustle of animals moving freely without fear. The sun shone brightly, and the girls laughed and chatted as they worked. Suddenly, the peaceful atmosphere was shattered by the sound of rustling leaves. Shakuntala's pet fawn darted towards her, trembling violently. "Oh, what's wrong, my little one?" she exclaimed, picking up the frightened creature and soothing it gently. At that moment, a young hermit appeared and explained, "King Dushyanta is out hunting nearby. He almost struck your deer with his arrow, but I intervened and told him it was your pet." The girls gathered around the fawn, stroking it tenderly. "If the king had harmed you, I would have killed him myself," Shakuntala declared fiercely, clutching her pet. Her friends burst into laughter. "You wouldn't hurt a fly, and here you are talking about killing kings," they teased. Just then, Shakuntala sensed someone watching her. She glanced up and saw a strikingly handsome man standing nearby, his dark eyes fixed intently on her. His presence caught her off guard. Shakuntala, dressed in simple, coarse clothing adorned only with garlands of flowers, felt a blush rise to her cheeks under his unwavering gaze. Despite her modest attire, her natural beauty left the stranger spellbound. Her friends, noticing the man, turned to him curiously. The stranger stepped forward and asked politely, "Can you direct me to Rishi Kanva's ashram? I wish to pay my respects to the great sage." Priyangvada smiled and introduced Shakuntala. "This is Shakuntala, Rishi Kanva's adopted daughter. She is currently in charge of the ashram while he is away." The girls invited the stranger to the ashram and eagerly inquired about his identity. The young man, however, seemed hesitant to reveal who he was, and the girls did not press him. Together, they began walking back to the ashram. Shakuntala, feeling shy, walked ahead of the group, but she couldn't resist glancing back occasionally. Her heart fluttered as she admired the man's noble features and commanding presence. He carried himself with an air of strength and dignity that left her both intrigued and captivated. The four of them soon reached the ashram, where the residents eagerly came out to greet the visitor. It was only then that Shakuntala and her friends realized the stranger was none other than King Dushyanta himself. The ashramites were thrilled to host the renowned king and urged him to stay for a few days. During his stay, Dushyanta's admiration for Shakuntala deepened into love. Her innocent charm and ethereal beauty captivated him completely. Her neck was as delicate and graceful as a swan's, her slim waist like a lotus stem, her dark eyes reminiscent of bees resting on lotus petals, and her lips as red as wild berries. The sound of her laughter was as soothing as the gentle gurgle of the river flowing near the ashram. Enchanted, Dushyanta resolved to marry Shakuntala and make her his queen. Shakuntala, too, had given her heart to the noble king. Yet she hesitated to marry without the blessings of her adoptive father, Kanva. However, Dushyanta could not linger at the ashram, as pressing matters awaited him in his kingdom. Kanva's return was uncertain, and the king's responsibilities called him back to his capital. Thus, to the joy of the ashramites, Dushyanta and Shakuntala were married in a simple yet sacred ceremony. Before departing for his kingdom, Dushyanta presented Shakuntala with a precious signet ring, promising to return soon to take her to Hastinapura in royal splendor. After Dushyanta left, Shakuntala's demeanor changed. Once as lively as a wild doe and as cheerful as the birds in the forest, she became quiet and introspective. Though she still laughed and chatted with her friends, her thoughts often seemed distant. She began to seek solitude, spending hours lost in reverie. Her friends, initially amused and teasing, soon realized she was yearning for her husband and left her in peace. One day, while Kanva was still away, Priyangvada and Ansuya were busy watering the plants. Shakuntala, sitting nearby, was deep in thought, wondering when Dushyanta would return. Suddenly, the ashram received an unexpected guest, sage Durvasa, renowned for his fiery temper. Shakuntala, lost in her daydreams, failed to notice the sage's arrival. Durvasa approached her hut, expecting to be greeted, but no one emerged to welcome him. His annoyance grew when he saw Shakuntala sitting quietly, a faraway look in her eyes and a faint smile on her lips. He cleared his throat and made deliberate noises, but Shakuntala remained oblivious. Feeling insulted, Durvasa's anger boiled over. "This is intolerable," he exclaimed. "She has forgotten her sacred duty as a host, blinded by thoughts of her king." Trembling with rage, he raised his hand and pronounced a curse. "The man who has made you neglect your duty will forget you entirely, even when he sees you." Durvasa stormed out of the ashram, still fuming. Shakuntala, lost in her thoughts, remained blissfully unaware of the curse. However, Priyangvada and Ansuya, returning from their chores, overheard the sage's terrible words. Shocked and distressed, they rushed to him, pleading for forgiveness. "O revered one," they begged, "she did not mean to insult you. Please do not punish her so harshly. It would shatter her heart." Falling at his feet, they implored him to reconsider. Durvasa, though reluctant, softened at their sincere entreaties. "I cannot revoke my curse," he said, "but I can offer a remedy. When the king sees the ring he gave her, his memory will return." Relieved, Priyangvada and Ansuya decided not to burden Shakuntala with the knowledge of the curse. Confident she would never part with Dushyanta's ring, they believed there was no need to trouble her with unnecessary worry. Days passed, but Dushyanta neither came for Shakuntala nor sent any message. Shortly afterward, Kanva returned to the ashram. Upon hearing about Shakuntala's marriage to the king, he was overjoyed. "She was destined to be a queen," he said, his heart brimming with happiness, and he decided to send Shakuntala to her husband's palace. Though Shakuntala was excited at the thought of reuniting with Dushyanta, her heart was heavy with sadness. She had always been the cherished darling of the ashram, loved and pampered by everyone. Her bonds with her foster father, friends, and even the animals of the forest were deep and heartfelt. Among them, her beloved pet deer, now fully grown, held a special place in her heart. Finally, the day of her departure arrived. With tearful eyes, Shakuntala bid an emotional farewell to her companions. She stole away into the forest to say goodbye to the animals and trees she had grown up with. "I am leaving forever," she whispered, caressing the bark of a tree. "I will miss you dearly, but my lord awaits, and I must go." The journey to Hastinapura began. Shakuntala was accompanied by Gautami and a few ashramites. Since they traveled on foot, the journey was long and arduous. They stopped frequently to rest and eat, and at night, they took shelter in ashrams or with hospitable villagers along the way. Days turned into weeks as they made their way toward their destination. On the final day of the journey, Shakuntala woke early and went to the river for her bath. Her heart was filled with joy as she anticipated reuniting with her beloved. While she bathed in the serene waters, thinking of Dushyanta, an unfortunate event unfolded. A signet ring, the very token of her husband's love, slipped from her finger and fell into the river. A passing fish spotted the gleaming ring and swallowed it whole. Unaware of the loss, Shakuntala emerged from the water, her face radiant and her spirit high. Gautami, noticing her glow, said affectionately, "You look beautiful, my child. The king is indeed fortunate to have you as his wife." With light hearts, they resumed the final leg of their journey. By evening, they arrived at the gates of Hastinapura. Shakuntala was awestruck by the grandeur of the palace, the exotic gardens, and the opulent attire of the people around her. Even the guards, with their gleaming spears, looked majestic and imposing. The soldiers at the gate stopped the group and inquired about their purpose. When they informed the guards that they wished to meet the king, the message was relayed, and Dushyanta summoned them with warmth. "I hold the greatest respect for sage Kanva," Dushyanta said graciously. "If there is anything he desires, I would consider it an honor to fulfill his request." The ashramites smiled and replied, "The sage asks for nothing but sends his blessings. We have come to return to you what is rightfully yours." The king looked puzzled by their words. They explained that Kanva had sent Shakuntala, his wife, to join him. Gesturing toward Shakuntala, who stood silently with her head bowed, they said they had undertaken the journey solely to bring her to him. To their shock, the king's face clouded with confusion. "Wife!" he exclaimed incredulously. "I have never seen this woman in my life." The ashramites were stunned. They themselves had witnessed the sacred union of the king and Shakuntala. How could he deny it? Shakuntala stood frozen, her mind reeling with disbelief. How could the noble Dushyanta, known for his integrity and virtue, utter such a cruel falsehood? Equally perplexed, Dushyanta regarded Shakuntala. Her innocent and graceful demeanor seemed genuine, yet why was she claiming something so untrue? The air grew heavy with tension as both sides struggled to make sense of the inexplicable situation. At last, Shakuntala spoke, her voice trembling with grief. She pleaded with Dushyanta to remember the day he had gone hunting and had begun to chase a deer that had led him to her. She recounted the happy days he had spent in the forest, the time when he had fallen deeply in love with her. She reminded him of how, at his insistence, they had married, even though her foster father was not present at the ashram. "How can you forget everything?" she asked, her sigh heavy with despair. But Dushyanta's eyes held no recognition. He stared blankly at Shakuntala, clearly unconvinced by her words. Tears of humiliation welled in her eyes, slowly tracing paths down her cheeks. Yet the king remained unmoved. "I don't understand why you're saying such nonsense," he replied irritably. "How could I possibly forget such a beautiful woman if I had married her?" Desperately, Shakuntala raised her hand and said, "Then deny that you gave me this ring." Her voice faltered, and her heart sank as she glanced at her finger. There was no ring. Panic overtook her as she turned to Gautami and murmured in despair, "All is lost. I've lost the ring." The incident troubled Dushyanta deeply for days. Though he remained steadfast in his denial, an unease lingered. Something about the situation felt unresolved, as if a vital clue was missing. The girl's sincerity was undeniable, yet his memory betrayed no trace of her. One day, the mystery unraveled in the most unexpected way. A commotion erupted in the palace as a royal guard entered the court, dragging a poor fisherman behind him. "Your Highness," the guard announced, "this man is a thief. He was attempting to sell your signet ring in the market. I caught him red-handed." "Here is your ring, my lord." With a flourish, the guard presented the ring, clearly proud of his catch. The moment Dushyanta's eyes fell on the ring, his mind cleared as if a veil had been lifted. Memories flooded back with vivid clarity. He saw himself chasing a deer in the forest, the same deer that had brought him to Shakuntala. He remembered the blissful days spent at Kanva's ashram, falling in love with Shakuntala and their sacred marriage. Guilt and shame overwhelmed the king as he realized the enormity of his actions. He recalled with anguish how cruelly he had denied his gentle wife and turned her away. Determined to right his wrongs, he sent messengers far and wide to search for her. Yet Shakuntala seemed to have vanished. Some whispered that her celestial mother, Menaka, had taken her away to protect her. Kanva, when approached, revealed only the truth of Durvasa's curse, that the king had forgotten his wife due to the sage's wrath. Search parties scoured plains and mountains, venturing into the most remote corners of the land, but their efforts were in vain. Shakuntala could not be found. Grief consumed Dushyanta. Though he now knew the curse had caused his lapse, he could not forgive himself for his treatment of Shakuntala. His heart ached with the weight of regret, longing to make amends for the pain he had caused her. One day, while wandering through the mountains, King Dushyanta stumbled upon a strikingly handsome and brave young boy. The child was fearlessly playing with lion cubs, treating them as casually as another child might play with kittens. The boy teased the cubs relentlessly, even attempting to count their teeth. Nearby, an older girl tried to scold him, but the boy refused to listen. When she warned him that the lioness might attack, he merely laughed and declared, "A mere lioness doesn't scare me. If you give me something else to play with, I'll leave the cubs alone." At last, the girl went off in search of a new toy to placate him. Hidden behind a bush, Dushyanta watched the scene unfold with amazement. The boy's courage and commanding demeanor left a deep impression on him. Intrigued, he stepped forward and asked the boy his name. "I am Sarvadaman," the boy replied proudly. The king marveled at the appropriateness of the name, which meant one who can conquer all. Indeed, this child seemed capable of ruling over everything. Overcome with admiration and a strange tenderness, Dushyanta remarked, "I never imagined a hermit's son could be so fearless." The boy's eyes flashed with indignation. "I am not a hermit's son," he said scornfully. "My father is a king. His name is Dushyanta." Hearing this, Dushyanta's heart skipped a beat. Overwhelmed with joy, he realized that Sarvadaman was his own son. Filled with emotion, he lifted the boy into his arms and held him close. Tears brimmed in his eyes as he asked about the boy's mother. At that moment, Shakuntala appeared, walking toward them. She stopped in her tracks when she saw Dushyanta and hesitated, torn between her emotions. Then, deciding against confronting him, she turned to leave. Dushyanta hurried to her and fell at her feet, his voice trembling with repentance. "Shakuntala," he said, "I know my actions are unforgivable, but if you will listen to the truth, perhaps you might find it in your heart to forgive me." He explained how he had intended to send for her as soon as he returned to his kingdom, but Durvasa's curse had wiped her from his memory. He recounted how the sight of the ring had restored his recollection and how he had since been searching for her, living in torment every moment they were apart. "I have not known a moment of peace," he confessed, his voice heavy with regret. Shakuntala listened in amazement, for she had never known about the curse. Moved by Dushyanta's sorrow and sincerity, her tender heart softened, and she forgave him. As the reunion unfolded, a thunderous rumbling filled the air, and a divine voice echoed from the heavens. "Take your faithful wife and son back with you, King Dushyanta. Your son is destined to be the greatest ruler of all time. Call him Bharat." The people of the ashram were overjoyed at the family's reunion. Amidst great celebration, Dushyanta returned to his kingdom, accompanied by his beloved wife and their son, Bharat. Their journey marked the beginning of a new chapter, one filled with hope, love, and destiny fulfilled.